Hey there, come closer to the fire for a little while. Tonight, look up into the dark above you and imagine a God so old that he did not need thunder, weapons, or miracle to rule. He was the sky itself. Before temples rose from mud brick, before kings carved their names into clay, before even the younger gods began to quarrel over mankind, there was a silent height the Sumerians called An. Latif. Many would call him Anu. He did not walk among humans with a sword in his hand. He did not shout across the earth. He shaped everything by being above everything. Heaven, order, distance, law, and the stillness that made creation possible. Tonight, we follow that stillness. A sky father older than Zeus, older than Jupiter, older than many names people later gave to heaven. A god whose children became the Anunnaki, whose star sign marked every divine name, whose unseen authority touched kingship, temples, clay tablets, the flood, and the fragile breath of mankind. If this kind of ancient night story helps you settle in, give the video a gentle like and subscribe. It helps more quiet wanderers find these old worlds by the fire. Now let the room grow dim. Let the candlelight stay low. We are going back to the first silence, before the world had edges. Picture Mesopotamia under a wide evening sky. The day has been hot. The plain between the Tigris and the Euphrates still holds the warmth of the sun. Dust rests on the walls of houses. Reeds whisper near the water. A dog moves through a narrow lane and then disappears behind a doorway. Somewhere, a woman closes a clay jar. Somewhere, a scribe smooths a wet tablet with the side of his hand. Above all of them, the sky opens. Not a modern sky softened by city light, but a deep, ancient darkness, sharp with stars. The Milky Way stretches overhead like pale smoke. The moon, when it rises, seems close enough to belong to the same household as the rivers. Venus appears and vanishes with a brightness that feels almost personal. Saturn sits at the edge of human sight, patient and cold. To the Sumerians, this sky was not empty. It was presence. It was authority. It was Anu. His name began as An, the word for sky, heaven, and the high realm beyond reach. That is important. He was not first imagined as a familiar old man sitting on a cloud. That is a later kind of picture. At the oldest layer, Anu was more like the sky becoming divine. The blue distance by day and the star-filled depth by night. The dome under which everything lived, and the height from which all order descended. Honestly, I have always found that more haunting than a god with a face. A face can turn toward you. A face can soften. A face can be argued with. But the sky simply remains. It watches without blinking. It covers the cruel and the kind. It stretches over birth, harvest, flood, hunger, prayer, kingship, and reign. It does not hurry to explain itself. It is there before the city wakes, and still there after the city becomes dust. That was Anu, the remote father of the gods, the silent source, the one whose power did not come from action, but from being the highest point in the order of things. The old Sumerian imagination began with a unity called An-ki, heaven and earth together, not yet separated, not yet above and below, a kind of cosmic body before it had learned posture. There was no high temple yet, no low field, no human footstep, no priest, no offering smoke, no written word, only the possibility of difference waiting inside stillness. Then heaven rose, earth settled below, space opened between them. That separation is one of the gentlest and most powerful ideas in ancient myth. Creation does not begin with a violent strike. It begins with distance, with a boundary, with the first sense that there is above and beneath, divine and mortal, lasting and temporary. Anu belongs to the above. Ki belongs to the earth below. Between them, the living world will eventually breathe. Think of that first separation like a slow inhale. Heaven lifting away from earth. Air entering the gap. Darkness becoming layered. Water finding a path. Time beginning, not as a clock, but as room for movement. Without separation, nothing can happen. Without distance, no wind can pass. Without sky, no star can guide. Without earth, no clay can hold the sign. That is why Anu shaped heaven, earth, and mankind without kneeling in the mud to form each brick. His shaping was structural. He was not the craftsman bending over a small object. He was the architecture that allowed every craftsman to exist. Not the voice, but the silence in which voices became possible. The Sumerians seemed to understand this deeply. Their world was not easy. The rivers that fed them could also destroy them. Flood could come with little mercy. Drought could narrow life into hunger. Fields had to be measured. Canals repaired. Walls rebuilt. Grain counted. Labor organized. In such a world, order was not decoration. Order was survival. So they looked upward. The stars returned in pattern. The moon changed and returned. The planets wandered but did not wander meaninglessly. The sky, unlike the river, did not overflow its banks. There was comfort in that. Not a soft comfort. Exactly. More like a stone foundation beneath a trembling house. The sky was constant. The sky gave rhythm. The sky was the place where law seemed older than human fear. Anu became the name of that law. When early scribes wrote the sign for An, they used a star-shaped mark. That sign later became the divine determinative in cuneiform writing, a small sign placed before the names of gods to show that what followed belonged to the sacred realm. Every divine name carried the star of Anu before it, as if each god had to pass through his sky before becoming fully divine in writing. That is a beautiful thing, if you pause with it. A scribe sits in low light. The clay is cool and damp. His reed stylus rests between his fingers. Before he writes a divine name, he presses the star sign into the surface. A little wedge. Another. The clay yields. Heaven enters mud. A sign no larger than a fingernail carries the whole thought of the Sumerian cosmos. All divinity descends from the sky. All sacred naming begins under Anu. The tablet will dry. It may break. It may sleep under a fallen wall for thousands of years. It may be burned by the destruction of a city and made stronger by flame. It may cross seas in a crate and rest behind glass in a museum, while people in coats pass by with no idea that a star is still shining inside the clay. That is the strange patience of ancient writing. It does not need to be loud. It only needs to endure. Anu endured in just that way. He did not fill every myth with his own movements. Enlil storms through many stories. Enki thinks, tricks, saves, and shapes. Inanna burns with desire, war, descent, and return. Marduk later fights the old chaos and takes the stage in Babylon. But Anu remains high, remote, almost too still to become drama. He is the authority behind the drama, the court to which the younger gods appeal, the father whose name makes a decree legitimate, the sky that does not need to descend because everything already stands beneath it. In later Akkadian and Babylonian traditions, Anu grows more personal. He receives a consort, Antu. He sits in a golden or radiant palace at the height of heaven. The younger gods approach him with petitions. His decrees cannot be overturned. He becomes more like a celestial king, a remote sovereign in a court of divine officials. But even there, he is quiet. His power is not the noisy power of someone eager to prove himself. It is the power of a throne that has always been there, a kind of authority so settled that even rebellion has to define itself against him. This is why the source speaks of Anu as the father of the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were not random spirits. They were royal offspring, divine descendants, beings of rank and function. Some became judges, some builders, some watchers, some rulers of domains. They did not all behave gently. They argued, desired, punished, deceived, created, and destroyed. Yet their legitimacy flowed downward from Anu, like starlight from an unreachable height. The Sumerians saw the universe as layered. At the top, Anu. Below him, the great gods. Below them, lesser gods. Below them, humans. Every level served the one above. That can feel severe to modern ears. But in the old river world, hierarchy was not only oppression. It was also the way order survived. A canal needs banks. A field needs measure. A city needs storehouses, scribes, builders, priests, and watchers. A cosmos, imagined by such a society, also needed ranks. Anu was the first rank, the point from which every other place could be measured. Imagine Uruk at Dusk. The temple precinct rises above the city. Mud brick steps hold the last gold of the sun. Dust floats in the air, turning the light soft. Priests move slowly. A torch is lifted. Incense begins to burn. The smoke rises, thin and pale, and the first star appears above the western edge of the sky. A crowd below grows quiet, not silent from fear, silent because the sky has begun to speak in its old way. There is a reason the white temple of Uruk was set high. There is a reason ziggurats rose in stages, layer above layer, like human-made mountains on a flat plain. They were not only buildings, they were gestures, brick prayers, stairways that did not truly reach heaven, but showed the human wish to align with it. To climb such steps was to reenact creation. Earth below, heaven above, human body between. Each footstep upward felt like a small answer to the first separation of An and Ki. A priest with a bowl in his hands, climbing slowly in the dim blue before dawn, did not merely walk to a shrine. He moved through the layers of the cosmos in miniature. His robe brushed against brick. His breath slowed. The city below became quieter with each step. Above him, the stars waited like witnesses. At the summit, he offered smoke. The smoke rose. No one could see it reach Anu, but that was not the point. The act itself maintained the line. The Sumerians believed ritual was not simply asking for favors. It was maintenance. Every hymn, every offering, every measured cup of beer, every grain placed before a god, every word spoken in the correct order, kept the bond between heaven and earth from loosening. That is darker than it sounds. Because if order must be maintained, then order can fail. If the boundary must be renewed, then the boundary can tremble. If heaven and earth must be aligned through ritual, then misalignment is always possible. Flood, drought, famine, plague, political collapse. These were not random accidents to the ancient mind. They were signs that balance had been disturbed. Something in the cosmic structure had shifted. The river had forgotten its place. The sky had withheld its mercy. The gods had turned their faces, or the humans had failed to answer properly. Anu did not rage through these events as a storm god might. He remained above them. That is what makes him eerie. The silence of Anu can feel reassuring when the stars move correctly. It can feel terrifying when the world below breaks apart and the sky still remains calm. A flood can take a city. The sky remains. A king candy. The sky remains. A temple can crumble. The sky remains. The Father of the gods does not hurry down to explain. He lets order speak through consequence. You know that feeling when you look up at night during a personal sorrow, and the stars are still beautiful, almost rudely beautiful. Your life may be bending under some private weight, but the sky does not change its expression. That is close to the feeling of Anu. Not cruel, perhaps. Not tender either. Vast. Lawful. Unreachable. The Sumerians did not need him to be cozy. They needed him to be constant. And from that constancy, the rest of the story unfolds. The gods will be born. Enlil will become the breath between heaven and earth. Enki will carry wisdom in the hidden waters. Inanna will burn as the bright and dangerous star. Humans will rise from clay, small and bewildered, with enough intelligence to serve and enough longing to wonder why they were made. But before all of that, there is only the sky. Anu, the first height, the name that turned distance into divinity, the silence from which order began. Before there were gods with quarrels, before there were humans with prayers, before cities pressed their walls against the plain, there was the quiet problem of separation. The old texts do not begin like modern explosions of light. They begin almost politely, with absence. When heaven had not been named, when earth below had not been called by name. The sentence has a softness to it, but also a great darkness. Nothing is yet where it belongs, because nothing has yet been named. No direction, no above, no below, no temple stair, no field, no hand lifting clay to write. In that nameless condition, the Sumerians imagined the world as a kind of unformed unity. Anki, heaven and earth together. You might picture it as dark water, though even that is already too much shape. A stillness before stillness had a witness, a pressure of possibility. The whole cosmos folded into one body, waiting for the first distinction. Then, slowly, the split. Heaven rises. Earth settles. Between them, space opens. It is tempting to make the moment dramatic, with thunder, cracking light, and a roar big enough to shake the sleeping listener out of the blanket. But that is not the feeling of the source. The Sumerian beginning is calmer, more solemn. The world unfolds like a breath that has been held too long. The first breath of creation is distance. Think of morning mist lifting from a river. At first, water and air seem to belong to one gray body. Then the mist rises, and the river below becomes visible. The world separates without violence. Shape comes forward. Surface appears. Depth appears. A bird calls from somewhere unseen. Suddenly, there is a place for things to happen. So it was with heaven and earth. Once they divided, existence gained direction. Anu became the upper realm, high, unreachable, radiant, and still. Ki became the earth below, fertile, changeable, maternal, dark with seed and burial. Between them, life would later move like a small lamp carried through a wide house. The separation also created longing. That is easy to miss. When heaven and earth were one, there was no distance to cross. Once they were apart, every ritual, every prayer, every temple, every rising plume of smoke, every ziggurat step, every lifted face became an answer to separation. The whole history of religion, in a way, begins with that gap. Humanity would later live inside it. We still do. Feet on earth, eyes on sky, breath moving between. In the early mythic imagination, Anu did not need a dramatic birth. He was not born as a baby god in a cradle of stars. He simply became the named sky. To name heaven was to name him. To recognize above was to recognize his presence. Naming mattered deeply. Before a thing is named, it is difficult to hold in memory. Once named, It has edges. It can be invoked, written, taught, feared, loved, measured. The Sumerians understood this in their bones. Their writing system began with practical needs: grain, animals, labor, offerings, fields. But writing soon became more than accounting. It became the art of fixing the invisible in clay. The sign of Anu, the star sign, is one of the most powerful examples. Imagine a young scribe in a temple school. The room is warm. The smell of wet clay is everywhere. Older boys murmur signs under their breath. A teacher moves slowly between them, correcting hands, because even ancient homework apparently found a way to make children nervous. The young scribe holds a reed stylus. His tablet is soft. He is told to write a divine name. First, he presses the star. Not because the star is decoration, because without the star, the name has not yet entered sacred order. The clay receives the mark. A little wedge. Another. A sign that says, what follows belongs to the gods. The child may not understand all the theology beneath his hand. He may be thinking about food, or sleep, or whether his mark is ugly. But the gesture is immense. Heaven is being placed before language. Every god begins under the star of Anu. That is how deep his authority runs. The cosmos that unfolds from him is not chaos first and order later, at least not in the quiet Sumerian frame. It is order emerging through definition. Heaven above, earth below, waters beneath and between. The underworld, Kur, dim and dusty. The Apsu, hidden freshwater depth. The living world in the middle, fragile, breathing, always dependent on balance. The Sumerian universe was not infinite in the modern sense. It was structured, layered, inhabited. Every realm had its quality. The sky was not empty blue. It was the roof of existence. The earth was not only ground. It was the body of life and burial. The waters were not merely useful. They were passages, source, mysteries. Anu occupied the highest level. That height shaped everything below. Later hymns and stories placed his court in a radiant heaven, sometimes imagined as a palace above the stars. Not a noisy palace, not one crowded with the restless drama of later gods at a feast. Anu realm feels still, clean, almost too clear. A place where decrees are not argued with once spoken, because they settle into reality like stars into their courses. At his side, in later traditions, stands Antu, Queen of Heaven. Around him gather the divine assembly. Enlil, Enki, Inanna, Nanna, Utu, Ninhursag, and many others. But Anu remains different from them. They move. He anchors. They act. He authorizes. They carry force into wind, water, moonlight, love, war, birth, and justice. He remains the high principle from which their legitimacy flows. There is a strange peace in this. A civilization battered by flood and drought imagined that above all motion there was stillness. Not indifference alone, not comfort alone, stillness. The kind that lets motion have meaning. If Enlil is wind, then he needs space between heaven and earth to move through. If Enki is water, he needs channels and depths. If Inanna is Venus, she needs the ordered sky to appear, vanish, and return. If humans are clay with breath, they need earth below and heaven above to understand themselves. Everything depends on separation. Everything depends on Anu. The source compares this cosmic split with other ancient traditions. Later Egyptians would tell of not the sky lifted from Geb the earth. Hebrew texts would speak of waters divided above and below by a firmament. Greeks would remember Uranus and Gaia. Sky and earth, entangled in a divine family of birth and conflict. These echoes do not mean all traditions are the same. They are not. Each people dreamed with its own river, desert, sea, mountain, and fear. But the pattern is ancient. Humans look up. Humans look down. Then humans imagine that the world began when above and below were first made distinct. Why does that feel so natural to us? Maybe because every human life repeats it. A child learns the ground before the sky. Then the child looks up, and the world becomes enormous. Up and down are among the first sacred directions. We fall toward earth. We pray toward heaven. We bury below. We bless above. Our bodies teach us cosmology before any priest does. The Sumerians gave that bodily knowledge a name. Anu, the High One, the Unreachable One, the one whose silence holds. Now picture the first dawn after the separation of heaven and earth, not as history, but as mythic feeling. The earth is dark and damp. No city stands yet. No ziggurat. No human hand. The plain is unmarked, but potential waits in it. Above, the sky is pale, newly distant. There is space between them now, and in that space, a faint movement begins. Wind. Enlil is coming. Not yet as a full character with temple and decree, but as the first breath between the separated realms. The air that proves the gap exists. The unseen body of distance. This is how the children of Anu begin to enter the story. Creation has made room. Now movement can fill it. Enlil, Lord of Air, will raise the heavens and secure the separation. In some stories, he physically parts his parents, lifting an upward, pressing key downward, making the living world possible between them. This is not a small act. Without the air gap, there is no human world. No birds. No smoke. No breath. No words traveling from mouth to ear. Enlil gives space its force. But even Enlil, stern and mighty as he becomes, is still acting within the order that Anu represents. He does not replace the Sky Father. He gives motion to the Sky Father principle. The silent law becomes wind. The high order becomes command. The still dome now has breath beneath it. Then Enki enters through water, hidden water, fresh water, the Abzu, below the earth. Enki is clever in a way Anu is not, because Anu does not need cleverness. Cleverness belongs to situations where limits exist, where rules can bend, where problems must be solved by paths that are not obvious. Enki is the god of artisans, magicians, builders, thinkers, and all those who know that a straight road is not always the safest one. If Anu is the structure, Enlil is the enforcement, Enki is the adjustment. A civilization needs all three. Too much stillness, and nothing begins. Too much wind, and everything is torn away. Too much water, and the world dissolves. But in balance, the cosmos breathes. This balance is the secret heart of the Anu story. He is remote, but not irrelevant. He is quiet, but not absent. He is the father because all the forces below him require his distance to define their work. His children are not random additions. They are the unfolding of his first order into living complexity. Nana measures time with the moon. Utu brings sunlight and justice. Inanna shines as Venus. Morning and evening, desire and violence in one bright body. Nin-Hersag gathers the maternal and earthly powers of birth. Each one is a piece of the cosmos waking into function. And below them, still not yet formed in this moment, humanity waits as possibility. That is the dark tenderness of the beginning. Mankind is not first. Mankind is late. The heavens exist before us. The earth settles before us. The gods take their offices before us. The divine decrees are older than our breath. We enter a world already structured, already watched, already governed by distances we did not choose. That may feel humbling. It may even feel a little lonely. But it also means that when humans finally appear, we do not enter nothingness. We enter a house already built from sky, earth, water, breath, and law. A difficult house, yes. A house where flood can come, kings can fail, and gods can disagree. But not a meaningless house. The Sumerians saw themselves as latecomers to order, not owners of creation, participants in it. This is a very different idea from modern individual confidence. We like to imagine ourselves as makers of meaning. The Sumerians often imagined meaning as something already above them, something to be read, served, copied, maintained, a star path, a divine decree, a measured field, a temple plan, a clay tablet, a ritual word. Wisdom was not invention. Wisdom was alignment. That word matters. Alignment. The stars in their courses. The temple with the sky. The king with divine law. The field with canal water. The human body with ritual purity. The spoken name with the written sign. Everything had to line up, or disorder entered through the gaps. Anu was the highest alignment, the vertical thread, the silent axis. If you stand beneath the night sky tonight, wherever you are, some faint echo of that ancient feeling may still reach you. You do not need to believe what the Sumerians believed to feel it. The sky is still above. The earth is still below. Your breath still moves between. The old directions remain inside the body. Upward, wonder. Downward, rest. Between them, life. That is where Anu waits in the story, not as a character rushing into action, but as the first condition that lets action begin. The heavens have been named. The earth has found its place. The star sign has entered clay. The children of the sky are beginning to stir. And in the quiet space between above and below, the world is learning how to breathe. The first movement after separation was breath. Not speech yet. Not prayer. Not the cry of a newborn city rising from mud. Only breath, the invisible body of distance moving between heaven and earth. That breath became Enlil. In the old Sumerian imagination, when the sky had lifted and the earth had settled below, there was still a vast space that needed life inside it. A gap can be empty, or it can become air. It can be silence, or it can become the place where voices travel. Enlil belonged to that living gap. His name is often understood as Lord of Air, Lord of Wind, Lord of the unseen force that moves across the world and makes the stillness stir. If Anu was the highest sky, then Enlil was the power that passed beneath it. He was not gentle in every story. Later, myths remember him as stern, commanding, sometimes frightening. He could grant kingship, and he could send ruin. He could bless the field, or trouble the sleep of the gods. But at the beginning, before all that weight gathered around his name, his function was almost tender in its necessity. He made room. Some traditions say Enlil separated heaven from earth, raising on high above Ki so that the world between them could exist. Imagine that slowly, not as a violent tearing, but as a divine widening. A pressure lifting. A great blue height rising away. A dark, fertile earth settling below. Between them, the first breath. Without that breath, no bird crosses the sky. No smoke rises from a temple. No word leaves one mouth and reaches another. No human chest lifts in sleep. No reed moves beside the river. No storm announces the gods. The air is easy to ignore because it is everywhere. But in a world of myth, the everywhere thing is often the most sacred. Enlil was that everywhere force. He carried the order of Anu downward into motion. Picture the plain between the rivers after sunset. The heat loosens from the day. The baked walls of a city still glow faintly with stored warmth. A man pours water over his hands beside a courtyard. A child falls asleep against a reed mat. A priest steps out onto a temple platform and feels the wind shift before he sees the stars. Dust moves along the stones. Ah, Tohi bends. The people below may say, Enlil is passing. They cannot see him. They feel him. That is the nature of wind. It is presence without body. It touches the skin, moves the trees, cools the brow, bends smoke, carries scent, brings storm, brings seed, brings life and fear together. In such a force, the Sumerians saw a god who could not be treated lightly. Yet Evan Enlil, powerful as he was, did not replace Anu. That matters. Anu remained the height. Enlil became the breath beneath it. A father does not need to do every act if the children carry his pattern into the world. In this divine family, the stillness of Anu unfolds through younger powers, each one taking a piece of creation and making it active. Enlil gives command to space. Enki gives wisdom to water. Ninhursag gives body to birth. Nana gives rhythm to time. Utu gives light to judgment. Inanna gives desire its dangerous brightness. Together, they make the universe feel inhabited, but the order behind them remains Anu, silent, high, and difficult to reach. Now, let the story move from wind to water. The air between heaven and earth is not enough by itself. A living world needs depth. It needs rivers, wells, hidden springs, moisture inside soil, and the strange underground generosity that lets a seed split in darkness. That realm belonged to Enki, known later as Ea. Enki is one of the most human of the great gods, not because he is weak, but because he thinks around corners. He is not the storm command of Enlil, and not the remote authority of Anu. He is the quiet mind beside the water, listening for the hidden root. His wisdom is not stiff. It bends. It flows. It slips under doors. He dwells in the Apsu, the deep freshwater realm beneath the earth. Imagine the Abzu not as an ordinary pool, but as a hidden source under everything. A dark coolness beneath the hot plain. Water sleeping under fields. Water rising in wells. Water feeding reeds, canals, clay, cattle, and human mouths. In Mesopotamia, water was never only pleasant. It was the difference between city and dust. Enki ruled that difference. His city was Eridu, remembered as one of the oldest cities, standing near marsh and sea, where fresh water met salt and the land seemed half born from mud. There, in myth, Enki kept wisdom, magic, craft, and the powers that allowed civilization to function. If Enlil commanded order, Enki understood how order could survive when the world became difficult. There is a softness in him, but not simplicity. Enki can deceive. Enki can protect. Enki can drink too much and lose sacred powers to Inanna. Enki can warn a human through a wall when the other gods have agreed to silence. He is not pure kindness. He is clever mercy. He knows that law without interpretation can become cruelty, and that sometimes the only way to save life is to find a narrow crack in the decree. The source places Enki under the wider authority of Anu. The water god does not stand outside the cosmic structure. He is one of its living methods. Where Anu gives the high frame, Enki provides the practical intelligence needed inside that frame. A cosmos cannot live on law alone. It needs adaptation. It needs someone who knows how to mend what strictness would break. That balance between Enlil and Enki becomes one of the great rhythms of Mesopotamian thought. Air and water, decree and wisdom, structure and flexibility. the stern ruler and the clever counselor. Too much Enlil, and the world may become hard enough to crush its own creatures. Too much Enki, and order may dissolve into loophole and flood. Together, they make life possible. And above them, Anu remains the measure. The Father in the high silence. The Source speaks of this divine family as the birth of the living cosmos. Not a family in the cozy modern sense, with warm meals and little domestic quarrels, though the gods certainly have their share of drama. It is a family as structure, a genealogy of forces. Each god is born from the first separation, and each carries a function that makes reality more complete. Nanda, the moon god, enters quietly. His light is not the sun. It does not command the day. It measures the night. Month by month, his face changes. It grows, tins, vanishes, returns. In a world that depends on calendars, planting, ritual timing, and the memory of cycles, the moon is not decorative. It is a clock written in light. A farmer watches it. A priest records it. A woman marks time by it. A city sets festivals beneath it. Nana gives the heavens rhythm, and rhythm is a form of mercy. It tells the human mind that time is not pure chaos. Something returns. Something can be expected. The dark sky is not only vast, it has a pulse. Then comes Utu, the sun. Utu rises with clarity. He crosses the sky and sees what humans would hide. Because the sun sees everything, Utu becomes justice. His light enters doorways, fields, courts, and roads. He watches contracts. He witnesses oaths. At evening, he descends toward the underworld and carries judgment into the realm of the dead. This is a beautiful, ancient thought. The sun does not only warm the living, it also travels where the living cannot go, carrying sight into darkness. If Anu is the silent height, Utu is the seeing light. Justice, in that world, is not invented by people in a court. It belongs to the structure of reality. The eye of the sun makes truth possible, or at least makes lies harder to shelter. Then Inanna appears, and the story becomes more dangerous. She is the bright planet Venus, morning star and evening star, appearing before dawn and after sunset like a blade of light near the edge of night. She is love and war, desire and conquest, beauty and upheaval. She is not easy to soothe. She is not a domestic little brightness. She is the force that pulls humans toward union and battle, toward song and destruction, toward longing and power. Inanna shows that the family of Anu is not only stable, it is alive, and life is never only calm. The cosmos needs passion, but passion can tear. It needs beauty, but beauty can become hunger. It needs courage, but courage can become violence. Inanna carries those contradictions without apology. Her brightness belongs to Anu's sky, but her movement belongs to the restless heart of the world below. Ninhursag, the mother goddess, gathers another kind of power. She is connected with birth, body, mountain, womb, and the shaping of life. If Anu is the distant condition of being, and Enki the wisdom of formation, Ninhursag is the deep bodily fact that life must come through flesh. Nothing living enters the world as an abstraction. It arrives wet, fragile, breathing, dependent. In the later creation of humanity, her role becomes essential. Clay alone is not enough. Formula alone is not enough. Life requires a mothering power, a place of formation, a patient dark where shape becomes body. The divine family expands, and with it the world becomes more layered. Wind above the field, water under the ground, moon over the calendar, sun over justice, Venus over desire, mother power over birth, all beneath the sky of Anu. This is why the Sumerians could look at the heavens and see a household, not because they thought stars were simple lamps, but because the sky seemed full of relationships. A planet does not move randomly. It keeps to its pattern. A god does not exist alone. He or she belongs to a lineage, a city, a ritual, a function, a story. The divine family made the universe intelligible. If you knew the gods, you knew the world. If you knew their relationships, you understood why wind might fight water, why love might lead to war, why moon and sun together measured time and judgment, why birth and death belong to one structure. Anu remains strangely undefined in all of this. The other gods gather colors. Enlil has storm and command. Enki has water and clever speech. Inanna has radiance and danger. Utu has sunlight. Nana has the moon. Anu has height. Height may seem thin beside such vivid powers, but height is what lets them be placed. Without a highest, no hierarchy. Without a sky, no stars. Without distance, no longing upward. That is why kings invoked Anu when claiming legitimacy. That is why priests spoke his name to sanctify decrees. That is why the star signs stood before divine names. Not because Anu was always the most dramatic, but because he was the origin of the sacred order in which drama could occur. Think of a quiet father in an old house. Not warm, perhaps. Not talkative. Not even easy to love. But his presence shapes every room. The younger ones argue, laugh, plot, break rules, run into the courtyard, return. Yet all of them know whose house it is. That is Anu in the divine household. Remote, unseen, impossible to ignore. The source emphasizes that the Sumerians did not imagine creation as a finished event. Creation continued through administration. That word may sound dull, but in ancient Mesopotamia, administration was nearly sacred. Fields had to be measured. Grain had to be counted. Offerings had to be recorded. Workers had to be assigned. Water had to be guided through canals. A city survived through records, order, and repeated maintenance. So heaven was imagined the same way. A cosmic bureaucracy. That sounds almost funny at first, like the universe with paperwork. But maybe it is not funny at all. A chaotic universe kills. A recorded universe can be lived in. The gods hold offices because the world has functions. They deliberate because fate must be measured. They issue decrees because reality itself needs structure. Anu sits above that heavenly administration as the final source of authority. Enlil enforce. Enki interprets. The others perform their stations. The divine council becomes the model for earthly councils, kings, judges, and temple officials. Heaven teaches the city how to organize itself. The city, in return, mirrors heaven through walls, laws, offerings, festivals, and clay tablets. This is the beginning of civilization in the Anu story. Not yet humans, fully formed from clay. Not yet the flood. Not yet the great rupture. But the structure is prepared. The gods have offices. The sky has names. The earth has places. The waters have depth. Time has rhythm. Judgment has light. Desire has a star. And beneath all of it, or perhaps inside all of it, a question waits. What place will humans have in such a system? The answer will not be simple. Humans will not be made as rulers. They will not be made as equals. They will be made late, small, useful, and aware enough to suffer their usefulness. They will carry baskets, build temples, feed gods, speak names, copy signs, and look upward with the same strange longing we still feel now. That is the dark tenderness of Mesopotamian creation. We are not first. We are needed. And being needed is not the same as being free. For now, though, humanity is still only possibility in the dust. The children of Anu have taken their stations. The wind moves. The waters murmur. The moon measures. The sun watches. Venus burns at the edge of night. The mother power waits with clay and body still unjoined. Above them all, the Sky Father remains still, silent enough to be mistaken for absence, present enough that every god carries his sign. The palace of Anu is difficult to imagine because it is not truly a palace in the ordinary sense. It is not a noisy hall full of music and wine. It is not a place where a restless king paces with jewels at his throat. It is not built for spectacle. The highest heaven of Anu is made from stillness first, then from law, then from light. Later, scribes and poets tried to give it form because human minds need walls, thresholds, floors, and thrones. They spoke of a radiant court above the stars, a kingdom of Karam brilliance where decrees were shaped before descending into the world. They imagined Anu enthroned at the height of heaven, surrounded by divine being, attended by the great gods, his authority so complete that he did not need to raise his voice. The stars were like windows in that palace. The Milky Way, perhaps, like a bright road across its outer court. The planets, like messengers moving in careful paths. That image may sound distant, but there is a strange comfort in it. The heavens as a palace means the sky is not empty. It is inhabited by order. It means the darkness above the river plain is not a meaningless roof, but a court where the decisions of existence are held in silence. Imagine standing at night in Uruk. The city below is breathing softly. Brick walls hold the warmth of the day. Lamps tremble in doorways. The Euphrates moves beyond the houses, dark and slow. Above the city rises the temple precinct, high terraces of mud brick and plaster. Pale under the moon, a priest climbs step after step, carrying incense in a bowl. His feet know the route. One step. Pause. Another step. The robe brushes his ankles. The night air cools his face. Below him, ordinary life fades into a low murmur. Above him, the stars sharpen. He climbs not because Anu needs smoke as a man needs food. He climbs because the city believes the connection must be renewed. The summit of the temple is a threshold. The smoke must rise. The words must be spoken. The lower world must answer the higher one, or the silence between them may become too wide. At the top, the priest sets the bowl down carefully. The incense catches. Smoke rises in a thin blue line. For a moment, it seems to write in air. Then it disappears. To the Sumerians, that disappearance was not failure. It was arrival of another kind. Smoke does not climb forever in visible form, but ritual does not require the eyes to follow everything. Some paths continue after sight gives up. This is how the palace of Anu touches earth. Not by a staircase that mortals can truly climb, but by repetition, smoke, words, stars, and trust. The source describes the divine court as structured, almost administrative. Anu sits at the highest point. Enlil stands as executor of his decrees. Enki stands as interpreter of wisdom. Around them gather the Anunnaki, the great assembly, not wild spirits, but ranked powers, each with a function in the maintenance of reality. The word maintenance matters. The Sumerian cosmos was not a machine that could be wound once and left alone. It needed tending. Seasons had to return. Rivers had to behave. Kings had to be legitimized. Temples had to be fed. The dead had to be remembered. Oaths had to hold. Fields had to be measured. The boundary between order and chaos had to be renewed through ritual and decree. In such a universe, the palace of Anu is the central office of existence. That phrase might sound a little too modern, but there is truth in it. Heaven was imagined with ranks, petitions, councils, judgments, and documents because Mesopotamia itself knew the sacred power of administration. A tablet could decide a field boundary. A seal could confirm a transaction. A list could preserve a temple economy. A decree could shift human lives. So the gods had decrees too. The me, the divine powers and principles that made the world operate. Kingship, priesthood, writing, music, craft, war, peace, sexuality, truth, falsehood, lamentation, joy, descent, return. These were not simply talents or customs. They were cosmic permissions. Civilization itself was held together by them. At the top of that chain of authority stood Anu. He did not personally perform every me. He sanctioned the order in which they could exist. That is why his silence is powerful. A noisy ruler may command attention for a moment. A silent ruler, whose law is built into the world, commands everything, even when no one is looking. In the myths, the gods gather in council during times of crisis. A complaint rises. A rebellion begins. Humanity becomes too loud. A flood is proposed. A city must be judged. A divine power must be transferred. Always, somewhere above or behind the action, Anu represents the final height against which a decision becomes valid. He is not always the loudest voice. He is the last permission. The celestial court mirrors earthly kingship, and earthly kingship mirrors the celestial court. This is one of the great movements of Sumerian thought. A human king does not rule by personal strength alone. He rules because kingship has descended from heaven. His authority is sacred only when aligned with the order above. The Sumerian king list begins with the idea that kingship descended from heaven. That line is more than poetry. It is a political theology condensed into a single breath. Rule is not merely taken. It must be received. A city becomes legitimate when heaven recognizes it. A king becomes more than a strong man when his power is placed inside cosmic order. The rod and ring, seen in Mesopotamian art, belong to this world of measurement and rule. They are often interpreted as symbols of justice, kingship, and divine authority. They suggest that ruling means measuring, dividing, setting boundaries, giving each thing its proper place. This is very much an Anu kind of thought. Creation itself began with separation. Kingship continues that work by measuring society. Fields must be marked. Rights must be defined. Offerings must be counted. Temples must be supplied. A city without measure slides toward confusion. A cosmos without decree slides toward chaos. So the palace above the stars is not far from the court on earth. The same pattern repeats at different scales. Anu above, king below, divine counsel above, human counsel below, decrees in heaven, laws on clay, stars in fixed paths, canals in measured lines. The whole world becomes a system of echoes. That may sound comforting, and it was, but it also carried a quiet dread. If everything depends on alignment, then misalignment is dangerous. If the king fails, the city suffers. If ritual fails, the gods withdraw. If the stars show disorder, earth trembles. If decrees are ignored, flood may come. Order is beautiful because disorder is waiting. The palace of Anu shines because darkness surrounds it. Imagine one of the heavenly councils as the source invites us to. Not with shouting, not with dramatic music. A chamber of radiant stillness. The younger gods gathered, each bearing a domain. Enlil, with stern air around him. Enki, with the cool thought of water beneath his words. Inanna bright and impatient, never entirely still. Nanna, pale and measured. Utu golden and clear. Ninhursag grave with the knowledge of bodies and birth, and Anu on the throne. He does not need to move. The council speaks, and in speaking, they arrange reality. A season is set. A fate is written. A king is granted legitimacy. A flood is considered. A human city is blessed or left exposed. When Anu approves, the decree becomes more than intention. It becomes structure. Once spoken, the decree enters the world. The river rises. The star appears. The king rules. The storm comes. The child is born. The old Sumerians did not separate event from meaning the way modern minds often try to do. A flood was not only water. A drought was not only weather. A successful harvest was not only agriculture. Each event belonged to a chain of divine order. The world was a text being written from above, and humans lived inside its sentences. This is why scribes matter so much. A scribe in Mesopotamia was not only a clerk. He was a tiny earthly echo of the cosmic recorder. He pressed signs into clay as the heavens pressed patterns into time. He counted grain because the gods counted fates. He listed offerings because ritual order required memory. He learned the star sign of Anu before divine names because all sacred writing began under the sky. Picture a scribe at night, late after the temple has quieted. The lamp is small. The clay tablet rests in his lap. His hand is tired. Outside, the wind moves dust against the wall. He copies a line about Anu, about the divine council, about a decree that gives order to heaven and earth. He may not feel grand. He may only be trying not to make an error before his teacher sees it. Yet, his small work carries the architecture of the cosmos forward. There is a humor in that too. The divine order of the universe, preserved by someone hoping his handwriting is good enough. That is very human, and it makes the story warmer. Anu may be remote, but the memory of Anu survives through hands. Clay, lamps, mistakes, corrections, and tired eyes. The palace above the stars is unreachable, but its reflection is everywhere below. In the temple summit where incense rises, in the court where judges sit, in the field boundary measured with care, in the calendar fixed by moon and stars, in the royal inscription that begins by invoking heaven, in the small star sign pressed before the name of a god. Even silence itself becomes sacred. The source says, Anu rules by stillness. This is different from emptiness. Silence can be empty, but it can also be full. The silence before a judge speaks. The silence in a temple before the hymn begins. The silence of a night sky so clear that the stars seem to be thinking. The silence of a father whose authority fills the room without needing explanation. Anu is that kind of silence. It can comfort. It can also frighten. Because a silent authority does not always tell you what it intends. The younger gods bring human concerns into the court. Work, rebellion, the need for labor, the limits of mortality, flood, renewal. But Anu remains above the emotional storm. His decrees are not presented as personal moods. They are law. They are the settlement of balance. When Enlil grows angry at noisy humanity, the question of flood rises toward the divine council. When Enki protects human life through cleverness, he works within the space that law leaves open. When Inanna seeks powers, when kings seek legitimacy, when cities claim divine favor, every path rises finely toward the silent height. This makes Anu less like a character and more like the grammar of the myth. The gods are the words. Anu is the rule that lets the sentence hold. And because he is grammar, he survives transformation. Later, Babylonians may raise Marduk to supreme power, but Marduk still needs a genealogy that passes through Anu. Later, Assyrians may worship Ashur as imperial lord, but the idea of high heavenly authority remains. Later traditions may speak different names, different heavens, different fathers above the world, but the old structure continues to echo. A highest heaven, a remote father, a court of divine powers, a law above kings, a sky that watches. This is how Anu travels without walking, not as a statue carried through the streets, but as an idea carried through civilization. A principle so useful that later cultures reshape it rather than abandon it. For the sleeping listener, the palace of Anu may feel far away, but perhaps not entirely. Every time the night sky gives the feeling of order beyond the small confusions of the day, something of that ancient palace returns. Every time a person looks upward and feels both small and included, the old Sky Father is not so distant as he seemed. The palace above the stars is not a place we can enter, but it is a way of imagining that the universe has structure. A way of saying that above flood, hunger, death, and collapse, there is still a pattern. A way of placing human fear beneath a dome that does not fall. The source does not ask us to worship Anu. It asks us to understand what he meant. To people living where rivers could betray them, where kings rose and vanished, where mud brick returned to mud. Anu was the assurance that something remained above change. The sky does not crumble when the temple does. The stars still return after the flood. The highest palace remains beyond ruin. That is why the old god endures in fragments. Not because he is the most colorful, but because he is the most difficult to remove. He is woven into the act of looking up. The priest finishes his offering. The smoke has vanished into the dark. The city breathes below. Above, the palace of Anu remains unseen, but the stars hold their places. And in that steady darkness, the divine council gathers, preparing the decrees that will soon reach down into clay, water, lavor, and mankind. The decrees of heaven did not remain in heaven. They descended slowly, not as lightning, not as a voice that shook the roof of the world, but as patterns that humans learned to repeat with brick, water, smoke, law, and careful hands. That is how the city enters the story. A Sumerian city was never only a place where people slept near one another. It was a model of the cosmos, built from mud. Its walls divided safe space from wild space. Its canals guided water as the gods guided fate. Its storehouses gathered grain the way the heavens gathered stars. Its temple rose above the houses as the sky rose above the earth. The city was a mirror. Not a perfect mirror, because humans never make perfect things. The walls cracked. The canals silted. The kings failed. The priests grew tired. The scribes made errors and probably complained about their hands after a long day of copying signs into clay. But still, the city tried. It tried to answer heaven. Uruk becomes the great image here. Uruk of walls and temples. Uruk of Inanna. Uruk of scribes. Markets. Courtyards. Dust. Songs. And footsteps. Uruk, where the sacred precinct called Iana carried a name that meant House of Heaven. Pause with that name. House of Heaven. A building made from earth, named as the dwelling of the sky. There is something almost impossible in that, and also very human. We cannot reach the sky, so we build a place for the sky to descend. We cannot climb into the palace of Anu, so we raise steps from mud brick and call them holy. We cannot hold the stars, so we align stones, watch shadows, pour offerings, and say that this point on earth belongs to what is above. The Iana was not simply architecture. It was a statement. Heaven has a place here. The same thought lived in the ziggurat. A ziggurat is often called a stairway between earth and sky. But even that phrase can become too quick if we do not slow it down. Imagine the thing itself rising over a flat plain. Stage after stage, broad and heavy, made of countless bricks shaped by hands, dried by sun, carried by backs, stacked into height. A single brick is humble. A ziggurat is humility repeated until it becomes awe. The lower steps hold the dust of the city. Goats pass in nearby lanes. Merchants argue softly over measures of grain. Children chase one another between walls. Bakers work near ovens. Water jars cool in shade. The world below is busy, practical, varm, and human. Then the steps rise. Upward, the sounds thin. The smell of animals fades. The wind grows clearer. The priest climbing toward the top carries a bowl, or incense, or a measured offering, something small enough to fit in human hands, but heavy with meaning. His feet know the steps. His robe brushes brick. His breath changes as he climbs. Behind him, the city spreads out in brown and gold. Roofs, canals, smoke, courtyards, walls, fields beyond. Above him, the sky waits. At the summit, the priest is not in heaven. He is still on earth. But he stands where earth is trying most strongly to remember heaven. This is the city as mirror of Anu. Not because Anu himself walks down each morning to inspect the bricks, though I imagine some temple workers might have behaved better if they thought that was on the schedule. The mirror works through order. The ziggurat rises because the cosmos has levels. The temple receives offerings because the bond between divine and human must be maintained. The city measures fields because heaven itself is measured in star paths. The king rules because kingship has descended from above. Kingship is one of the most important threads in the Anu story. In the Sumerian imagination, kingship does not begin as mere human ambition. It comes down from heaven, That phrase appears in ancient tradition with a solemn weight. Kingship descends. It is not invented in a palace courtyard by a strong man with loud friends. It arrives as a sacred function, something granted from the upper order and carried by the ruler on earth. This does not mean kings were gentle. They were humans, and humans with power often become very creative in disappointing everyone. But the ideal mattered. A king was supposed to mirror cosmic order. He measured justice. He defended temples. He maintained canals. He supported offerings. He kept the city aligned with the will of the gods. His authority was not only political, it was vertical. It stretched upward toward Anu. In art, divine authority is often shown through symbols of measurement, especially the rod and ring. These signs suggest rule, justice, boundary, and proper proportion. A ruler receives not merely permission to command, but the duty to measure. That idea is older than many later philosophies of law. To rule is to set things in their place, to measure fields, to judge disputes, to keep the weak from being swallowed by the strong, at least in the ideal world that humans keep promising and only partly building. To make the city resemble heaven. Measurement is everywhere in Sumer. A field measured after the river withdraws. A canal measured so water reaches one plot and does not drown another. A ration measured for workers. A jar measured for temple beer. A tablet measured by lines and columns. A ritual measured by timing, words, gestures, and offerings. The gods measure the cosmos, and humans measure mud. That is civilization in miniature. Anu remains high above this daily work, but his silence gives the work its height. A temple record of grain is not just bookkeeping when the grain feeds the house of a god. A court decision is not just argument when justice descends from the structure of the heavens. A festival is not just celebration when the calendar follows the moon and stars. A city is not just crowded survival when its center is a house of heaven. The city becomes theology in brick. At night, Uruk would have sounded very different from the modern world. No electric hum. No engines. No glass towers. Just water moving in canals. Animals shifting in pens. Low voices behind walls. The crackle of small fires. A door closing. A pot set down. Footsteps fading along a lane. Above the city, the ziggurat holds the last light, then disappears into dark shape. Above that, the stars return. The people sleep under Anu. Even when they do not think of him, they sleep inside his order. Farmers wake before dawn and look toward the sky, because the sky gives timing. Priests wake and wash, because ritual begins before the city becomes noisy. Scribes enter tablet houses, because memory must be trained. Builders lift bricks, because temples do not repair themselves. Women grind grain. Men clear canals. Children learn names of gods before they understand what names can do. Daily life becomes part of the cosmic structure. This is the source deepest mood. Anu is not only a god in heaven. He is the principle that lets every earthly role make sense. The farmer does not merely farm. He maintains the created order by drawing food from earth under heaven. The scribe does not merely write. He fixes memory in clay, repeating the divine act of giving names and boundaries. The priest does not merely burn incense. He keeps the vertical path open. And the king, in his best imagined form, does not merely rule. He keeps earth facing the sky. Temple ritual was the breathing of that connection. At Dam, a priest might enter the sanctuary while the outer city still slept. The air inside would be cool, carrying the smell of oil, vo, dust, old incense, and clay. Lamps burned low. Shadows leaned against the walls. The statue of the god waited in stillness. The priest approached with washed hands and careful steps. Nothing was casual. A bowl placed here. A cloth lifted there. A word spoken in the correct order. Water poured. Bread set down. Beer offered. Encens lit. Smoke rose in a pale ribbon. The smoke mattered because it moved like prayer. It began in the hand, entered fire, became scent, became air, and disappeared upward. It crossed states the way ritual crossed realms. Grain became offering. Offering became smoke. Smoke became contact. The city answered the sky. This may sound peaceful, and often it was meant to be. But beneath it lies dread. A bond that must be renewed can break. The Sumerians did not imagine order as something permanent without care. They knew too much about rivers for that. A canal ignored becomes blocked. A field ignored becomes salt or weed. A wall ignored cracks. A temple ignored loses presence. A god unfed withdraws. A king unjustly ruling invites disorder. Everything must be maintained. That is why ritual has a dark edge. It is not only devotion. It is prevention. A hymn is also a repair. An offering is also a reassurance. A festival is also a renewal of alignment between heaven and earth. If humans stop answering, the silence above may deepen into abandonment. Anu himself does not need the food in the way lesser gods in some myths seem to need offerings. His remoteness is part of his power. Yet the order that flows from him requires channels. The gods below him, the temples, the cities, the king, the priests, the scribes, all form a chain. If one link weakens, the whole world feels less certain. This is why the Sumerians could look at a city and see the cosmos. The temple was heaven in miniature. The storehouse was abundance measured. The court was justice under light. The school was memory made disciplined. The canal was water given path. The wall was boundary against chaos. The ziggurat was the first separation repeated in brick. Earth below, sky above, human effort between. There is a tenderness in that, if you think about it. Humans made from clay, living in clay houses, writing on clay tablets, building clay temples, trying to speak to the sky. The material is humble, almost fragile. Mud cracks. Bricks crumble. Tablets break. A flood can soften the walls back into earth. And yet, through clay, the Sumerians reached for Anu. They did not reach with marble. They reached with mud. Maybe that is why their memory still feels intimate. Gold dazzles, but clay remembers the hand. It holds fingerprints. It carries the pressure of a reed stylus. It shows where a scribe hesitated. It dries into the shape of human intention. The city of Anu is not only in heaven. It is in every clay mark that tried to align the human world with the order above. The source ties this to the me, the divine decrees or powers that sustain civilization. The me are difficult to translate because they are not simple laws. They are more like the operating principles of culture and cosmos. Kingship, priesthood, truth, falsehood, craft, music, lament, joy, battle, peace, writing, desire, descent, return. The strange, full inventory of life. A world made only of sweetness would not need so many powers. The me include beauty and danger, song and conflict, justice and grief, order and the knowledge of disorder. That is realistic. A civilization does not survive by pretending war does not exist. It survives by knowing how to contain war. It does not survive by pretending grief will never come. It survives by giving grief ritual. It does not survive by pretending humans never lie. It survives by naming truth and falsehood, then building courts, oaths, and witnesses. The me makes civilization honest about its own shadows. And above the me, beyond their distribution and use, stands the original height of Anu. The powers may move through Enki, Inanna, Enlil, kings, priests, and cities, but their legitimacy still rises toward the sky, Father. Anu is the horizon of authority. Imagine a festival in Uruk. The city is awake before sunrise. Women carry baskets. Men lead animals. Musicians tune instruments. Priests prepare vessels. Children are told not to touch what is sacred, which of course makes the sacred thing more interesting to the child. Smoke lifts from kitchens and altars alike. The boundary between ordinary food and divine offering becomes thin. The statue of a god may be carried. Hymns may be sung. The crowd may move as one body through streets. Dust rises around feet. The ziggurat stands above them, watching without eyes. Somewhere high in the sky, Anu remains remote, but the festival is still under his order. The whole city becomes a ritual instrument. Voices rise. Drums sound. Water is poured. Doors open. Bread is lifted. The human world says, "We remember. We remember heaven. We remember order. We remember the first separation. We remember that life continues only when the bond is tended." This is the quiet answer to fear. Not denial, maintenance. The Sumerians did not remove danger from the world. They named it, measured it, and placed rituals around it like lamps around a dark courtyard. Anu gives the highest confidence that such tending matters. If there is a sky order, then human effort can align with it. If there is no order above, then ritual is only smoke. But if Anu remains, then smoke has direction. As the city sleeps again after the festival, the signs remain. Ash in bowls, footprints in dust, a half-finished tablet drying near a wall, a canal reflecting stars, a temple stair cooling under night air. Everything returns to quiet. But the quiet is not empty. It is the city listening upward. The mirror of heaven rests under the sky, imperfect, cracked, human, and still trying to shine. Before mankind breathed, the gods were already tired. That is a strange beginning for humanity. But Mesopotamian myth is rarely interested in flattering us too quickly. It does not say that humans were created first, or crowned at the center of the cosmos, or born because the gods could not bear to live without our company. It begins with labor. The lesser gods worked. They dug canals. They maintained the fields. They carried baskets of earth. They dredged waterways and shaped the river plain so that ordered life could continue between the Tigris and the Euphrates. In the source, this older labor crisis becomes one of the most important steps toward human creation. The gods themselves, or a lower class of divine workers, had been doing the work that later humans would perform. That detail makes the myth feel almost painfully grounded. The world of heaven is not floating far above daily life. It has mud under its fingernails. Imagine the divine workers before dawn. The air is already warm. The water in the canal is low and heavy. Mud clings to their legs. Tools bite into wet earth. Baskets fill and lift. Shoulders tighten. The load is carried, dumped, and carried again. The horizon brightens. Insects begin their thin sound over the reeds. The work does not end because the sun rises. It only becomes hotter. They are gods, yes, but in the myth, even gods can grow weary. This is one of those details that makes ancient stories feel unexpectedly modern. Anyone who has worked too long under someone else's order knows that exhaustion has its own theology. First, the body complains quietly. Then the mind begins counting. Then every command sounds heavier than it did yesterday. Then one day, the tool in the hand no longer feels like a tool. It feels like a chain. The lesser gods rebel. Their complaint rises through the divine order. And lo, stern lord of air and authority, hears disorder where he expects obedience. He wants the system preserved. Work must continue. Fields must be watered. Temples must be supplied. The rhythm of the cosmos cannot stop because the workers have discovered anger. But anger has already discovered them. The gods gather. The crisis rises to the high court. And above that court, as always, stands the silent authority of Anu. He is not imagined here as a frantic creator rushing into the mud. His role is higher, more distant. The problem comes before the divine council, and the solution must fit the cosmic order. A new being is needed, one below the gods, yet intelligent enough to understand command, one tied to earth, yet touched by divinity, one strong enough to work, fragile enough to remain dependent, aware enough to serve, and later, painfully, aware enough to wonder. Enki proposes the making of humanity. Enki, Lord of Wisdom and the Apsu, knows materials. He knows hidden water. He knows the formulas of life. He knows that creation is not only decree, but mixture, process, timing, and vessel. Beside him stands the mother goddess, known in different traditions as Ninhursag, Nintu, Mami, or by other names that gather birth and body into sacred form. They go to the clay, not to gold, not to crystal, not to a star. Clay, the same clay that lines the riverbank, the same clay that becomes brick, bowl, tablet, seal, toy, figurine, and grave, the same clay that receives footprints after rain, the same clay that dries and cracks under sun. Humble material, mortal material, material that can hold form for a while, then return to mud. This is the right substance for mankind. A human is not made from sky alone. A human is made from earth that has been lifted. Picture the riverbank at twilight. The water is slow. Reeds move softly. The mud is dark and cool beneath the surface skin warmed by day. Enki kneels, or perhaps we should not imagine a god kneeling, but let us do it anyway, because stories need hands. His fingers enter the clay. It yields. It clings. It smells of water, silt, roots, and deep time. He lifts it. The clay holds the marks of his fingers. Ninhursag prepares the place of formation. The Abzu water is brought. Hidden water, fresh water, the life beneath the earth. It is mixed into the clay. The mixture darkens. It becomes workable. Soft, resistant, ready. In some versions, a divine element is added, the blood or flesh of a slain god, a being connected with intelligence. The detail is dark, and we will keep it soft. It means that humanity is not earth alone. Something of the divine mind enters the mixture. Not enough to make us gods. Enough to make us restless. That may be the deepest tragedy of human creation. We are clay that knows it is clay. The birth goddess shapes. Enki speaks the formulas. The divine council waits. And Anu, from the highest sky, gives the breath, the awareness, the sanction that lets the formed thing become more than a figure. Before that breath, the body is shape. After it, the body is life. Imagine the first human form lying in dim sacred light. Wet clay made flesh in the language of myth. Limbs still. Mouth closed. Eyes sealed. Around it, the gods stand in a silence different from ordinary silence. It is the silence before something irreversible. Then breath enters. A small rise in the chest. Not thunder. Not flame. A breath. That is how mankind begins in this telling, with the smallest possible motion holding the largest consequence. The eyes open. They do not understand the stars yet. They do not know canals, kings, fields, hunger, grief, laughter, music, law, or death. They know only arrival, the shock of being, the first air, the first sound, the first light. Somewhere above, Anu remains distant, but his sky is now inside the body as breath. That is why humans belong between realms. We are earth from below, water from the deep, and breath from above. Clay, Aptu, and sky. Our bodies are a meeting place of the Sumerian cosmos, the riverbank in our flesh, the hidden water in our blood, the high air in our lungs. This is beautiful. It is also not entirely comforting, because the purpose given to humanity is work. Humans are made to bear the burden the lesser gods refused. They will dig the canals. They will farm the fields. They will build temples. They will prepare offerings. They will maintain the houses of the gods. They will speak the names. They will count the grain. They will lift baskets of earth under the same sun that tired the divine workers. The first human breath is followed by duty. That is the dark root of the myth. Human life begins with service. Modern listeners may resist that. We like stories where humanity is created from love, or freedom, or cosmic curiosity. The Sumerian story is colder, but perhaps more honest about the world it came from. Life was labor. Civilization was labor. Temples, canals, law, food, writing, and survival all demanded bodies. The myth does not hide the burden. It places the burden at the origin. And yet, Enki gives something more than obedience. He gives wisdom in measure. Not infinite wisdom, not the full knowledge of the gods. Enough to do the work. Enough to make tools. Enough to speak. Enough to remember. Enough to build a wall. Count grain. Shape a pot. Love a child. Fear the flood. And look up at the sky with questions no basket of earth can answer. That measure is important. Too little wisdom, and humans would be animals of labor only. Too much wisdom, and humans might become rivals. So we are placed in the painful middle, useful and aware, mortal and imaginative, servants who can dream, clay that writes about heaven. There are hints and related creation stories that the making was not simple. Some texts describe early forms, flawed forms, bodies made with limitations, and gods assigning them roles. Mainstream scholars often read these as ancient reflections on disability, social function, and the problem of suffering. That is a careful reading, and it gives dignity to the old text. It shows a world trying to find a place for different bodies inside sacred order. The source also notices the procedural quality of these stories. Creation through material. Creation through trial. Creation through adjustment. The gods do not simply speak perfect humanity into existence without difficulty. They shape, test, assign, repair, and sometimes fail to understand what they have made. Again, Anu remains above the process. He is not the potter. He is the sky under which the potter works. He is the final legitimacy of the living form. That distance gives the scene its eerie calm. Enki can bend close to clay. Ninhursag can shape the body. Enlil can demand the work continue. But Anu gives the high permission that makes mankind part of cosmic order rather than merely an experiment of mud. The first humans learn quickly, or they must. A hand closes around a tool. A foot sinks into river mud. A shoulder bends under a basket. A mouth learns the name of a god. A child learns the sound of water in a canal. A worker learns that the field must be cleared before the heat grows unbearable. A scribe learns that a mark pressed wrongly into clay can change a number, and changing a number can anger a supervisor, which proves that bureaucracy is one of the oldest demons with a very long tail. There is the small human smile in the dark. Even sacred civilization has paperwork. The humans build. They shape mud brick from the same substance as their mythic bodies. They stack walls. They repair canal banks. They plant barley. They thresh grain. They brew beer. They carry offerings into temples. They raise children who will inherit the same obligations. They sleep under roofs that must be maintained and under a sky that never lowers itself to explain why life must be so heavy. The gods receive. Smoke rises. Bread is placed. Beer is poured. Names are spoken. The chain holds. This is the human role after creation. Servant and participant. That second word matters. A servant simply obeys. A participant helps sustain the thing they obey. In the Sumerian view, humans are not equal to gods, but they are necessary to the divine economy. Without human offerings, the gods lack service. Without human labor, the temple system weakens. Without human memory, names fade. The clay worker becomes a keeper of order. That is a strange dignity. Low, but real. The first humans also become observers. They notice seasons. They watch stars. They learn lunar phases. They hear the river change. They recognize patterns in flood, drought, birth, sickness, and dream. They do not live only under command. They live under signs. Anu sky invites observation. Every upward glance becomes a tiny act of theology. A farmer pauses before dawn and sees Venus bright near the horizon. A priest reads the moon. A scribe copies a hymn. A child asks why the stars do not fall. No one has a modern answer, but the question itself is sacred. The human mind has begun to reach beyond labor. That may be the quiet surprise of creation. The gods make workers. They receive wanderers. A worker can carry earth. A wanderer can ask why earth and heaven are separated. And once such a question exists, humanity can never be only a tool. Maybe Enki knew that. Maybe Anu allowed it. Maybe the myth itself knows more than the gods in the myth seem to intend. Ancient stories often do that. They begin with one purpose and reveal another. Humans are made for service, yet the text that tells it is human art. Humans are subordinate, Yet human scribes preserve the gods. Humans are clay, yet clay tablets carry heaven through millennia. There is a hidden reversal there. The gods create humans to maintain temples. Humans create tablets to maintain gods. Who is preserving whom? The first breath becomes writing. The writing becomes memory. The memory becomes the story we are listening to now beside a fire that no Sumerian could have imagined. In a world, their tablets still somehow reach. Anu gave distance. Enki gave wisdom. Ninhursag gave a form. Enlil gave command. Humanity received work, breath, fear, and the ability to name the sky. That is the beginning of mankind in this dark and tender tradition. Not a throne, not a victory, a clay body opening its eyes beneath an ancient heaven, already carrying the burden of the gods, already listening for the silent order above. The clay body opened its eyes beneath heaven, and for a while the world held together. Humans worked. They carried baskets of earth. They repaired canals. They planted barley in the river plain. They shaped bricks from mud and straw. They lifted bread and beer before the gods, and smoke rose from the temples like a thin answer to the sky. The cities grew. At first, the noise was only life. A child crying near a doorway. A worker calling across water. A scribe whispering signs while his reed stylus pressed into clay. A woman grinding grain at dawn. Stone against stone. Slow and steady. A priest singing before a statue while the first light touched the temple wall. But life multiplies. A house becomes a street. A street becomes a city. A city becomes a whole plain of footsteps, animals, markets, fields, canals, quarrels, songs, births, burials, and prayers. The gods had asked for workers, and they received a world. In the flood traditions, that world becomes too loud. Enlil hears the human noise and cannot rest. He is the Lord of air and command, the God who values order, measure, silence, and obedience. To him, the sound of mankind is not only sound, it is imbalance. A swelling thing beneath heaven, a created servant becoming a crowd. Anu remains above this anger. He is not the storm. He is the high court above the storm, the silent frame in which divine decisions become possible. Enlil seeks correction. Enki seeks preservation. Humanity keeps working, not knowing that heaven has begun to speak about its ending. Imagine the river plain before the rain. The air is heavy. Reeds do not move. Dogs lie silent in courtyards. The canals reflect a sky hidden by cloud. In one small house, a man receives a warning. Some traditions call him Atrahasis. Some call him Ziusudra. Later, another story remembers Utnapishtim. The names change, but the shape remains. One human listens. Enki cannot warn him openly, so he speaks through a reed wall. This is one of the softest and strangest moments in the old myths. A god of wisdom does not break the law directly. He bends around it Mercy travels sideways, through woven reeds and still air. Build a boat. Leave what cannot be saved. Carry life through water. The man obeys, though the command must have looked foolish before the flood. Wood is measured. Pitch is warmed. Rope is tightened. Grain is stored in jars. Animals are brought close. Neighbors may stare and laugh softly, because a boat on dry ground always looks like madness until the sky begins to fall. Then the rain comes. At first, a few drops on dust. The scent of wet earth rises, warm and alive. Then more. Water tops roofs, fills alleys, gathers in courtyards. The river lifts with slow and terrible patience. Canals lose their edges. Fields become mirrors. Mud brick softens. Walls remember that they were mud before they became houses. The human world begins to return to clay. Inside the boat, time becomes small. Wood creaks. Pitch smells sharp and dark. Animals breathe in the close air. A child presses against a parent. A jar rolls and is caught by a tired hand. Outside, there is no street, no field, no temple step, only rain, water, and the deep sound of a world being unmade. The survivor does not defeat the flood. He endures it. That may be the most human part of the story. We do not defeat every darkness that comes. Sometimes we listen early. We build carefully. We carry what can be carried. We wait until the waters lower. When the flood ends, the gods discover their own need. The offerings have stopped. No bread rises toward the temples. No beer is poured. No smoke curls into the air. The divine houses are empty of service. The myth gives the unforgettable image of the gods gathering around the smell of sacrifice like hungry flies. It is not a dignified image. That is why it feels so old and true. The gods are powerful, but the system they built depends on humans. Enlil can silence mankind, but a silent earth does not feed heaven. Enki can preserve life, but mercy cannot erase the wound. The bond between gods and humans has broken, and now it must be repaired. Here, the high balance of Anu becomes necessary again. The world cannot be ruled by severity alone. It cannot survive on clever mercy alone. Law and compassion must return to order. Humanity must continue, but not without limits. After the flood, human life is given rhythm. Birth remains, but death remains beside it. Some lives are short. Some wombs stay closed. Some people are set apart for divine service. Humanity will rise again, but not endlessly. The sound of mankind will return as a murmur, not a roar. It is a hard peace. The survivor offers sacrifice on wet earth. The ground shines with water. Broken reeds lie tangled nearby. Smoke rises from a small flame into a sky that feels farther away than before. The bond is wounded, but not gone. The boat rests. The offering burns. The gods gather. The sky remains. And somewhere beyond the wet horizon, the first rebuilt temple is already waiting in the mud. After the flood, the world had to learn the sky again. The first nights must have felt very quiet. The ground was still soft. Reeds lay broken. Walls had slumped into brown shapes. The air smelled of silt, wet clay, smoke, and loss. Then someone looked upward. The stars were still there. That may have been the first comfort, and also the first ache. The earth had changed. The rivers had crossed their boundaries. Houses had failed. Fields had vanished under water. But the high order above had not drowned. The sky remained, cold, distant, steady. Anu remained. In the source, this return of the sky becomes the return of his gaze. Not a face looking down, not an apology, not a voice explaining the flood. More like alignment returning after terror. The moon resumes its phases. Venus appears again near dawn. The sun rises over mud and ruin. Light touches the world whether the world is ready or not. Humans begin again because life gives them little choice. A child needs food. A wall must be repaired. Grain must be dried. A fire must be coaxed from damp fuel. Tools must be found in the silt. So hands return to work. Slowly, silently, with more memory than before. A brick shaped after the flood is not only a brick. It is a refusal to let water have the last word. A canal cleared after the flood is not only a canal. It is a line drawn again between chaos and harvest. A tablet pressed after the flood is not only a record. It is a promise that the story will not vanish. The temples rise again, not all at once. Nothing real returns all at once. First a cleared place, then a platform, then a wall, then an offering bowl, then smoke, thin and pale, rising into the sky. The priest climbs the steps with more fear than before. The bricks are new. The city is smaller. The silence is larger. But the ritual begins. The line is renewed. In the world after the flood, order matters even more. Temples align with heaven. Calendars matter. Stars are watched. Laws are written. Archives are kept. Kingship descends again from heaven. Because rule must be restored after water has broken the old line. Anu becomes more distant through time, but not less important. Later, Babylon gives greater glory to Marduk. Assyria raises Ashur. Other lands remember high fathers and divine councils in their own ways. Chanaan speaks of El. Greek myth remembers sky fathers and thunder kings. These are not simple copies. Every culture changes what it receives. Names shift. Stories bend. Old gods become ancestors under new gods, but the structure remains. A high heaven, a remote father, a court above the world, a law higher than kings, a sky that watches without rushing to explain. That is the long shadow of Anu. His temples fall. His name fades from living worship. The ziggurat steps crumble under rain and conquest. Priests stop climbing. Hymns go silent. Clay tablets sleep beneath broken walls. Then, behind museum glass, visitors pass them with phones in their hands, not knowing that the little star sign before a divine name once carried the weight of heaven. Still, humans keep looking up. That is the final thread. The Sumerian priest climbed a ziggurat to watch Venus. The Babylonian astronomer recorded eclipses. The sailor watched the pole star. The modern scientist opens a telescope dome on a cold mountain, and glass turns toward galaxies older than human memory. The tools change. The gesture remains. A face lifted toward the dark. A question rising. A desire to find order in silence. A telescope is not a temple. An equation is not a hymn. But both can be forms of reverence when the mind becomes quiet before something larger than itself. The old god may not be named, but the feeling is familiar. Anu survives as a feeling. The feeling that above human noise there may be order. The feeling that distance can be sacred. The feeling that the world is not only what the hand can touch. Creation is not only an ancient event, it repeats whenever chaos becomes pattern. A child learning a name repeats creation. A scribe pressing a sign into clay repeats creation. A farmer guiding water repeats creation. A judge drawing a boundary repeats creation. A listener in the dark, letting an old story settle into calm, repeats creation in a small and quiet way. The sky is far, but distance is not absence. That may be the softest lesson of Anu. He does not comfort like a mother. He does not rescue like Enki. He does not command like Enlil. He does not burn like Inanna. He remains. Sometimes remaining is the oldest kind of power. Think again of the clay tablets. Broken, brown, quiet. They carry myths, floods, kings, offerings, divine names, and the star sign of heaven. The clay does not explain itself. It waits, like the sky. The fire beside us is low now. The room is dim. Outside, your own sky may be hidden by cloud, or softened by city light, or open and dark. It does not matter. Above the roofs, above the noise, above the private worries of this hour, space continues in silence. The Sumerians called that height An. Later voices called him Anu. The name is ancient, but the feeling is near. The temples are gone. The kings have lost their names. The rivers have changed their beds. But the sky still holds its quiet shape. Let Anu return to that silence. Let Enlil pass as a soft wind. Let Enki rest in hidden water. Let Inanna fade as the evening star. Let the clay tablets sleep beneath museum glass. And you, for this little while, do not need to climb the stairway between earth and heaven. Only rest beneath it. Good night.